Should I just start my hype videos like that? Would that be sick? Just Dante. Let's talk sports photography. First, I want to start by saying sports photography is somewhat easy, somewhat simple to get a decent photo of, which is why a lot of people do it. So I'm here to tell you guys today how to take unique and impactful sports photos. Glad you guys are here, let's do it. All right, so tip number one is to capture the in-between moments. Now, what I'm talking about here is usually everybody's shooting, during the play, while someone's shooting or running down the court or the field, something like that. But you can get some really sweet photos if you're still shooting after the play has happened or before it starts. For example, here's a couple shots of a couple third basemen, and this was not typically where people would be shooting. They'd be focused on the batter or the pitcher, something like that, waiting for a swing or a pitch. But I decided to capture a photo of the focus and the locked in eyes of those third basemen. And I think the photos turned out really cool because it's a photo that you don't really see a whole lot, because that's not something that photographers are usually looking to capture. But it evokes a whole other emotion and shows a whole other part of the game that's still going on. It's just not, I guess, the main focus of the game. The other thing you can capture with the in-between moments is a lot of emotion. This happens a lot during volleyball, happens a lot during football, where play stops after a score. For example, here's a couple shots of some volleyball games I shot this fall, and normally after a kill, after a dig, something like that, when the play ends, a lot of photographers put their camera down, start looking through images, seeing if they got a good one. Now that's the time when you keep that camera up and you look for an emotion, whether it's sad, happy, whatever. You can get an emotional shot by shooting when everybody else puts their camera down or scrolling through the action shots. You can get a shot that nobody else gets because it's one of those in-between moments that people don't normally think to shoot. So that's tip number one, to capture the in-between moments. Let's move on to number two. Now, tip number two is to use different focal lengths. A lot of times with sports photography, you think you need to be as zoomed in as possible, all the way punched in at 200 millimeters or 400 millimeters, because you're not really close to the action as it's happening. And a lot of times this is true and it helps to get good shots, but changing up your focal lengths can bring a whole different set, a whole different feel to the photos you get when you're shooting at a focal length that you normally wouldn't shoot at. Me personally, I like shooting a lot of wide stuff. I like capturing the atmosphere going around either a game or a landscape or something like that. So a lot of the times I'll switch to a 24-70 when I've been shooting a lot with a 70-200. And a lot of times I do this because of the crowd or the bench, or I want to get more atmosphere in the shots to make it feel like you're actually there, instead of all the way punched in where you get, yes, a clear and crisp shot, but you don't really have any idea of what it feels like to be there. So usually I'll switch out to a 24-70 and I'll shoot up at a subject and give them kind of this wide, vast area that they look like they're in. For example, here's a shot that I took at Memorial Stadium, and I was still using my 70-200, but I was all the way zoomed out at 70, and I wanted to get and capture the atmosphere around being in Memorial Stadium. So I was zoomed out all the way at 70 and I was shooting up at my subject to kind of bring in that atmosphere. You can see the stands, you can see the lights, and it just looks like this grand moment. It gives you a feeling of a big time moment in that photo. Sometimes when you're all the way punched in, for example, this shot I took all the way at 300 millimeters, you don't really see what's going on. You don't get a sense of what the atmosphere feels like at that game, because all it is kind of a clear shot of the player. So by changing up your focal lengths, you can kind of spark some more creativity. You can get different kinds of shots instead of just being limited to a certain focal length. You can switch it up. You don't always have to be super punched in at 200, 400 millimeters. And honestly, some of my favorite shots I took all the way zoomed out at 70 millimeters. So switch up your focal lengths, change up that look of your photos, and I promise you, you'll get sets of photos that nobody else has. Tip number 3 is composition. Now, like I said earlier, in sports photos, you can somewhat get a clear, solid shot of a player doing something pretty easily. Sports are kind of redundant in that sense, where especially with sports like volleyball or softball, the same thing is happening over and over and over and over. So you should probably be able to get a pretty good shot. Now, if you want to get unique photos and photos that stand out amongst a crowd of them, you got to change up your composition. If you ever see me at a sporting event, I'm always moving around. I'm just running circles around the arena or the stadium or wherever, and I'm never in the same spot for more than like maybe 5 minutes. And this is because I'm always looking for different compositions, different ways to shoot something. And a lot of the times, if you see a lot of photographers in one spot, I will go to the exact opposite spot and see if I can get a good photo from that spot. Use the rule of thirds to frame up your shots. Give a subject looking room over to the left, or give them no looking room and have them framed all the way over. Use frame blocking. This is one of my favorite ways to change up my compositions in sports photography, is by frame blocking. Put something in front of the lens, whether it's a fence post or another player or the bench, something like that, that can really change up your shot and again bring in that feeling of feeling like you were there at the game. For example, at state softball back in October, I like to shoot through the backstop. There's 3 wooden boards that make up the backstop of the softball complex in Hastings. And a lot of times I'll just be under there with my flip out screen. I'll be shooting through there and you'll see kind of a vignette of the wood boards, but the lens can just get through there to get a clear shot. And a lot of people will look at me and laugh at me and be like, what are you doing? There's so much easier way to get a photo. But I'm just trying to get a different composition, trying to test my creativity and see if I can get a cool shot through something that I know nobody else is doing. Because 1, it's uncomfortable, and 2, yes, a lot of people are looking at you, and that's kind of awkward to just be crouched down and shooting through pieces of wood. But here's a shot that I got from doing just that, and that's a shot that not many other people get because they don't think about it. They don't think about trying to get new compositions. They're just content with getting a clear shot of the subject doing whatever they're doing. Here's a shot that I love that I took way back when I was first starting sports photography, first starting photography in general. And I love this shot because it looks like they're the only 2 on the field. You can't see anybody else. And you can just kind of, your eye moves along the frame and sees just these 2 players. And it gives it a sense of like isolation, like it's just me and the guy I gotta beat him to the end zone. And that's a photo that's really impactful because of the way I composed it, and you just saw those 2 in the frame. So those are my 3 tips on how to take unique, different sports photos that not everyone will get. And I promise you that your photos will stand out from the crowd if you use some of these tips in your own sports photography. So thanks for watching. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you found it valuable, and I'll see you in the next video.